so the statue he dreams about, and Daniel comes in and interprets it. Statue breaks into 4 parts, really 5, but we're going to act like it's 4. The head of gold, which was what?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Babylon, right? The Babylonian captivity. And then you have the arms and chest of silver, which was what? The next kingdom, right? These are each kingdom.
Medo-Persian.
Okay, the Medo-Persian kingdom, 2 arms. And then we have the loins of brass or bronze, which was what?
The Grecian.
The Grecian. Like I say, you know world history if you just see that statue. Then the 2 legs of iron, which was what?
Rome.
The Rome, okay? Why 2 legs? This is kind of a tricky question. Why 2 legs? It has 2 parts just like there's 2 arms. Because it broke into the Eastern and Western Roman Empire.
That's right.
And when we think of the Roman Empire today, we always have the Western Europe. And we exclude the Eastern. Okay? So, and then you have the last part, the feet, which is our continuation of the legs. They're made of iron and clay. And what's that? What do we call that?
Prophetic gap. Or the church age.
Yeah, there's a prophetic gap there. And that's where the church age occurs, between just where they join together.
And then the revived Roman Empire.
The revived, and why 10 toes?
Because 10 kings.
10 kings, and he tells us that. So, are we in the revived Roman Empire yet?
No.
Yeah.
No, we're right at the cusp of it. That's why we study this, is because it affects us today. Four creatures came out, yes, of the sea, which was probably what, the Mediterranean Sea, because that's where the center of world power is going to be in Europe. Not here in America. We're going down. The 4 creatures. What was the first one?
Lion with 2 wings.
Yes.
Lion with eagle's wings.
Yes, eagle's wings, which corresponds to what?
England and the United States.
Babylon. No, Babylon.
Babylon. Okay, Babylon. So we have Babylon. It was an eagle. And remember the motif of the lion with wings that's been found in archaeological digs in Babylon. Well, they have that. Actually, lion with, so it was very much connected. What's the next animal that came up?
Bear.
A bear.
3 ribs in its mouth.
Yes, and one side was higher than the other, so you have 2 sides, which is what?
Russian.
The Medo-Persian
The
Empire.
Medo-Persian Empire, the 3 ribs, or the 3 countries, Egypt, Lydia, and I think, Babylon. They conquered, okay? And then it was raised up on one side because the Medes, or the Persians became stronger later. All right, and then what was the next creature that came up?
Leopard.
The leopard. Okay, good. And what did it have?
4 wings.
4 wings and 4 heads. 4 heads. Oh, it sounds like 4 heads, doesn't it? Yeah. And it conquered the world so fast. A leopard's fast, and you put 4 wings on it, even faster. And so, what does that represent? Alexander the Great, who conquered the whole known world in how long? About how many years? 10 years. 10 years. I mean, it's amazing.
And he was young too.
Yeah. Yeah, he was about in his 20s when he started. Early 20s.
Yeah.
And he went through there, and when he hit Jerusalem, this is kind of on the side. Remember what happened? Did he conquer Jerusalem?
No.
No. What happened was, when him and his army were coming over the hill, the priest the night before, high priest had the string. And it said, when Alexander comes, you wear your priestly robes, and all the priests wear their robes, and everybody else dress in white robes and come out and greet him. Well, he did that, and Alexander jumped off his horse, ran forward, and kneeled down before them. And all his generals are thinking, what is he doing? Mm-hmm. And Alexander explained later, he said, when I was in Macedonia, I had a dream. God appeared to me and said, when you see my people, and he showed him a vision of what he saw. And he said, when you see these people come out of the city, those are my people. And so Alexander actually went into the temple. The high priest showed him where he was in scripture and showed him that he would conquer and that he would win. Okay, what was the next beast after the leopard with 4 wings? And why did it have 4 heads on it? The leopard?
4 generals.
4 generals.
Was
4
divided up.
generals. which is going to be kind of significant later, okay? Because the kingdom broke up after he died, and then it was divided amongst the 4 generals, okay? And then what's the next one after that?
A dreadful beast, terrible,
Yeah.
exceedingly strong,
Dreadful
with
or
huge
interesting
iron
beast.
teeth.
Yeah, had iron teeth. And what does that correspond to?
Antichrist.
The Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire, right. So, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, sees a beautiful statue, and the next chapter 3, he builds a statue all of gold to represent my kingdom's here forever. Of course, he gets humbled. But, so we have those 4 beasts that correspond to the 4 parts of the statue. Right, then we get into Daniel 8. All right, what happens there? There's two creatures there. What's the first one?
Ram.
The ram, okay, with 2 horns, right? And one was higher than the other. The bear was raised up on one side. You got 2 arms on the statue. And what is that?
Medo-Persians?
The Medo-Persian Empire, okay? And then you see a goat with a notable horn between his eyes. And in chapter 8, he even names the kingdoms. He tells you what those 2 kingdoms are. So what was that goat? It was
The Grecian Empire.
Greek, because that's the next one that rose up. And was that horn between his eyes? Is the first king, which would be
Alexander.
the Great. Okay, and he stomps the ram, and we talked about the reasons he was really mad at the Medo-Persian Empire. So he stomps the ram down, conquers him, but then that horn is broken. That's Alexander dying, because when they got to India, conquered the whole Medo-Persian Empire, his men said, forget it, we're not going any further, 10 years, we want to go back home. Okay, and then he becomes very... he starts sulking, and eventually he gets pneumonia or something, and he dies. Okay, and out of that one horn, what came up? When that horn was broken, what replaced it?
The 4 horns.
Yes, the 4 horns, which correspond to the 4 heads.
4 generals.
4 generals.
Yeah, the 4 generals. And the reason why we get into that is there is 4 generals, and there's 2 that we're concerned with. You know, some take the east, some take the west. I forget, Lysimachus and someone else. But anyways, the one that went north of Israel in Syria was Seleucus. And then the one that went down south and a little bit over in Egypt was
Antiochus.
He's one of the kings, but Ptolemy.
Oh, Ptolemy, that's
So
right.
that started the Ptolemaic Empire.
Right.
So they go back and forth. And the reason he wants to concentrate on this, they go back and forth and war against each other. And what's in between?
Israel.
Israel. Meanwhile, the 4th king that rises up in the Seleucid Empire is a guy that is, he makes Bill Gates look like a Sunday school boy. And who is this guy?
Antiochus.
Yes, Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, the manifest glory is what Epiphanes means, or God manifests in the flesh is what he was saying. So he's a real humble guy. And he comes in and he's going to go down there to on one of his excursions down to Egypt. And he's going to really just, show them a lesson. But then at that point, Rome starts flexing its muscles. And they draw a circle around him. This little short guy, and like his little toga, he's a Roman senator, draws a circle around him and he goes, are you going to come and fight? Over here we say no. And he goes, well, I have to decide. So he draws a circle around him and says, you're going to decide before you get out of this circle. And at that point he says, okay, because he knows Rome is rising up. And so he declines. He goes, okay, I won't do it. So when he comes back, he's really mad. And who does he take it out on? Who does he go? Israel. Okay, and you can read about all this very detailed history in Daniel chapter 9. Okay, as you go through it. And he becomes a type, the clearest type in the Bible of the Antichrist. And in fact, some of his career and stuff, as you go through it, is going to, what the Antichrist is going to do. In fact, what he did was he wanted all the Jews to become, adopt the Grecian culture, put up gymnasiums everywhere. Now back then, when you would exercise, guess how you would exercise? Guess what kind of clothes you would wear?
A toga?
No, not even that much.
Diaper?
No, not even that much.
Oh my goodness.
You were naked.
Oh.
You were dude naked. So of course that offended the Jews.
Sure.
Greatly. And so what he did was he comes back through there, kills like, I forget how many Jews and stuff. Like there's this one mom, this is off the top of my head, that had her children circumcised, which they said was a no-no. And so what they did was, I think she had 12 sons. They fried their kids in a big frying pan in front of her. Then they got the baby, tied it around the mom's neck, killed the baby, made her march up the wall and fall off the wall to her death.
Wow.
That was just how evil he was. I know it's hard hearing these kind of things.
Who are we talking about?
Antiochus Epiphanes.
Epiphanes, the Antichrist.
So,
Type.
he goes to the temple, he slaughters a pig on the outside altar, and then he goes in there, he takes the juices of that pig and sprinkles a holy of holies with it. Now, and this is a pig. Now, to the Jews, is there any greater act you could do to desecrate the temple?
No.
Now, here's a question. I thought if you went the holy of holies, God would strike you dead.
That's right.
How did he go in?
Right.
How did he go in?
He just went in.
Yeah, he just went in. Why wasn't he struck dead? Here's why. Because Ezekiel had this vision
That's right.
of
He had
the
already
glory
left.
of God lifting
Living.
up from the temple, hovering over the city,
That's
and then
right.
leaving.
Right.
Because the Jews were so apostate.
Right.
So that's how he was able to do it. Now, as you get down and break down this, he, like I said, slaughters the pig, takes the juices, sprinkles all over the Holy of Holies, which there's no bigger desecration than that.
Right.
Okay? Then he sets up a statue. This is key. In the Holy of Holies. You know who it is? Zeus. And he does it on guess which day? His birthday. And he proclaims himself to be Zeus. Now, we go to Revelation. Jesus said to the church, he says, "You dwell where Satan's throne is." And actually, when I went to Turkey that time, I got to stand on that spot where the actual throne to Zeus and the statue of Zeus was there.
Wow.
I know, it's freaky. Like on this ridge, on this side of a hill, and you can look out and see the whole city and stuff. Yeah. And so the throne of Satan that it referred to was actually a throne to Zeus. So Zeus is the chief god, right? It's really Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And so he sets up a statue of Satan there, says, "That's me," on his birthday. And you know what the Jews called that? The abomination of desolation. All right? Now, we're going to cover it here in a second. In Matthew 24:15, Jesus said, "When you see," future tense, "the abomination of desolation." Wait a minute, that is past history a few hundred years back, right?
Yeah.
But remember, what's prophecy?
What's
What's
in
in
the
the
future?
Repeating pattern.
Yes, it's a
There's
repeating pattern. That's the way the Jews see it. Okay? A repeating pattern. So, you have the abomination of desolation, and now we know the Antichrist is going to do the same. And if you want to know what the abomination of desolation is, you just have to read Revelation 13 and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Okay? Because what he does there, especially in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, is the abomination of desolation. Although it doesn't call it by those words. All right? So we see again, prophecy repeating itself. It's going to be the final manifestation. It's going to be the Antichrist. And in fact, we have the exact date that he's going to do it. Because we have Daniel 9, 27, which I'm going to get into that in a second. We know exactly, precisely where in the tribulation period is the abomination of desolation. Okay? Let's go to Daniel 9:24 through 27. Okay? Daniel 9:24 through 27. What's this prophecy referred to as?
70 weeks of Daniel.
Yes. Daniel's 70 weeks. Okay? And we talked about, he says, and I'm using the New American Standard just so you know. 70 weeks, or it could be 70 sevens. It's just a heptad, a set of 7. And it can be translated as weeks, but it doesn't have to be. Okay? 77s have been decreed for your people in your holy city. And what's 77s added or multiplied to?
490 years.
490 years. We know their years as we go through it. 490 years, exactly. Now, who is this prophecy for? It's for the church, obviously, right?
No, it's for the Jews. It's for your people
Jews to bring them back.
and your city.
Yes, he says to Daniel, this is for your people, the Jewish people, he was Jewish, and for Jerusalem. So we know these 490 years, and that's significant. It has nothing to do with the church. The church is in this prophecy, but it is in it in a gap. Because we have 3 verses. So we're going to kind of chart it out. Daniel 9:24, Daniel 9:25, Daniel 9:26, and Daniel 9:27. Okay, so 77s or 490 years are for the Jewish people, for Jerusalem. And he gives us 6 things there that have to be accomplished within that 490 years. So this first verse is going to be the scope of the prophecy. Okay? Which is what? 490 years. And we're going to see 6 things right there that have to happen. Remember we went through all of them? Okay? So, and I'll come back up and review that real quick. And so, verse 25. He's going to give us how it starts. So you're to know and discern from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, that word for Prince, Nagid, actually means king, is what King Saul was referred to as Nagid, which is king, King David, Solomon, on and on. Okay? So don't let that word mess you up. There will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks it will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. So, the next one is the 69 weeks. All right? Which is 7 plus 62. All right? So, he gives us the beginning of it, which is a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Artaxerxes Longimanus gave that decree on March 14th, 445 BC. Okay? So, you go from there, and so that's going to be the first 69 weeks of this prophecy from March 14th, when he gave that decree, 445, March 14th, excuse me, 445 BC, okay? And if you count the days from the start of there, 69 weeks, okay? And you go to week of years, and so that's 483 years, right? And then 360 days, and you count up the days, you come to an exact day. And it's until, he says right there, rebuild Jerusalem until who? Mashiach Nagid, Messiah the Prince, or Messiah the King. So, from the time they're going to restore and rebuild Jerusalem from here, you come to what? April 6, 32 AD. From the time to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until, in other words, that's the terminus of the first 69 weeks, April 632 AD. What happened on that date? The triumphal entry where Jesus presents himself as the Nagid or the king. Before, when they try to come and take him and make him king, what did he do? He just kind of slipped right through them. There's a certain day that he would present himself as the king, and we know from Zechariah 9:9.
That he would ride the donkey.
Yes. Was it, behold, daughter Jerusalem, rejoice, for your king comes to you lowly, mounted on the foal of a donkey, which is actually, a donkey was the animal of the kings. So he wasn't humble because he was on the donkey. It was that here he is going to ride in on a king's animal, but he's still humble and lowly. 69 weeks, which is 7 and 2. Why 7? Because that's probably how long, and they don't have exact dates, from the decree until the building of the temple and the walls were completed. That's why it's 7 and 62. That says after the 62 weeks, which would be the 7s before it. Now we're going to go to something called a PG. You know what that is, right?
Prophetic gap.
Prophetic gap is going to occur in that verse. Because from the time he rode in as the king, it stops. The clock for Israel stops. Why? Because they rejected their king. That was the offer for them to have their Messiah. And if they would have accepted him, what would have happened? Theoretically. Which, of course, God knew it wasn't. It was part of his predetermined plan that he would be delivered up.
There wouldn't have been a church age.
Yeah. There would have been, what? The millennial kingdom. It would have started right then and there.
Right.
Or as the Jews know it, the Messianic kingdom would have started right then and there. There would have been no church. There would have been no death. But when you start thinking about these theoreticals, you know what I'm saying? Obviously, God, it said he predetermined this stuff for our good. So now we have the church. Okay. So, right here is the prophetic gap. Well, let's read verse 26 and see. It says, then after the 62 weeks, after this verse that covers the first 69 weeks, okay, after that, in this prophetic gap, what happens? It says the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. What's that mean? He was executed. When it says he will be cut off, the actual Hebrew is he will be executed. So it tells us in the text the Messiah will be executed. Okay, and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come. Now, who's the prince who is to come?
The Antichrist.
That would be the Antichrist.
The Antichrist. A lot of people mess this up and say, well, that's got referred to the Messiah. No. This is the Antichrist, okay? Now, it's the people of the prince who is to come. This is the Roman Empire that would be the Roman people, okay, will come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. When did that happen?
70 AD.
70 AD, exactly. Remember? They came in, remember Masada. A lot of Jews escaped to Masada, Herod's little palace up there. It took them years. They finally got him. They went up there. They had all committed suicide. They had slit each other's throat. And there's only a few people, like, some women and children that were hiding or whatever, that were left alive, that didn't participate, that were left to tell the story. So now we got the gap where Jesus is going to die, and then the city's going to. Now that's a very significant date. That the temple is going to be destroyed. All that's going to happen. They're going to come and destroy everything, and wars and desolations are going to happen. And all of a sudden, let's go to Daniel 9:27. And he, what does he refer to? You go back to the previous antecedent.
So it's just
the prince who is
Antichrist.
to come.
The Antichrist.
Yeah, and the Antichrist will make a firm covenant. It's actually confirm. He doesn't make a covenant. The Hebrew word means confirm. It's an existing covenant. Does it exist today? I don't know. Maybe the 10 kings draw it up and maybe he confirms it. But how long is it for?
1 week.
Which is?
7 years.
How long is the tribulation period?
7 years.
Okay. So now we have found all the weeks. So you see how that breaks down? Verse 24, 77's 490 years. the next verse. It gives you the first 69 weeks. Then you have a prophetic gap, which we're used to by now. So it shouldn't surprise us. Then you have the last 7 years. That's the tribulation period. What happens here? Well, let's read it. It says, you make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Who's the many? We'll go back to verse 24. Daniel's people, the Jews. Exactly. But in the middle of the week, literally the very middle, he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offerings, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. In other words, God has determined this guy who makes this covenant is going to get what? Okay, he's going to get his. He's already decreed it. It's already determined. But this guy, and if you go to the Septuagint, it says, Septuagint, I have to talk about that one of these days. That's a surprising translation. It gives insight. In fact, if anyone does their homework, they will realize this, is that the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation, which is done like in the, after the year 300 BC and the 200s or whatever. It was a guy down in Egypt who wanted all the significant works in his library and stuff. I think it was in Alexandria. He got like 6 Jews from each tribe, which was like 72 Jews, to translate the Bible. So the story is they went into 72 different rooms and translated the whole Old Testament to Greek. You want it in Greek. And according to the story, all 72 translations were word perfect with each other.
Wow.
And they actually used to go there annually every year to celebrate it. So is it true or not? Well, that's the story. And it was the Bible of the early church. Now, there's some people who are going to hate what I say and say, well, that's from the, it's from the pit of hell and all this other stuff. It was the Bible from the early church. And if you ever read where they're quoting an Old Testament verse and it doesn't quite match, if you go to the Septuagint, it matches perfectly. Okay? But don't let that throw you off. Okay? Don't let that throw you off. I have a strange view on translations. Everybody uses the Masoretic text, which is like in the 9th century, whereas the Septuagint is verifiably from the 200 BCs. And they had to be copying from a text of the Hebrew that was much older than the Masoretic. Now, I think the Masoretic is valid. Perfectly valid in God's word. So don't let me mess you up there, because for one thing, it has equal distance sequencing. Where it has the Bible code, you go every 50 letters and this and that. Yeah. So I that was supernatural. So I just tend to think both are valid. That's just my opinion. Well, how can both be in the Word of God? Well, I think God is expansive enough that could happen. Yes. All that to say that in the Septuagint, it says that word on the wing of abominations is kanaf. And they translate that as temple, because the temple had its kanaf, its corners, its wings. And so it says, in the temple, he will set up the abomination of desolation. It says it plainly in the Septuagint. That was the way people back in the BCs understood what the Hebrew would mean, and they would know, right? They would certainly know. Yes?
Do you think that we will see before the rapture the rebuilding of the temple?
I think that's there's all kinds of thoughts on that, okay? I know one thought is like they have all the building materials. All I got to do is get the word and they can get it up quick.
Yes.
I mean, real quick. Another thing I heard one teacher say was, as they're building it, you know how long it would take for them to actually have, not the grain offerings and the sacrifices here, but like sacrifices for sin in there? It would take 3.5 years with all the dedication, all the stuff they have to do. Isn't that weird? So if they start right at the beginning of the covenant, it would be right at mid-trib. And maybe that's the dedication of the temple. And maybe that's the abomination of desolation that happens, where the Antichrist, with everybody looking, goes in there and does at the abomination of desolation is going to happen. It's going to happen exactly. If you look at the timeline, if you look at the tribulation period, how long is that period?
7 years.
7 years is the whole period. Okay, and then that comes down to how many days? 1,260 on this side, 1,260 on that side. It's also called 42 months elsewhere, okay? which is, again, if you look at it, and this is based upon 360-day years. Okay, 360-day years to get these calculations. So, and that's what the prophetic calendar is based upon. And I am about 99% sure that at the beginning of the tribulation period, maybe a little before it, something's going to happen. I think something's going to happen in the heavens. And there's several events that could happen that's going to change the rotation of the earth, and we will literally go back to a 360-day year. Okay? So, that's just it doesn't have to, happen. I'm just saying, I just think it will. All right. So, any questions? We have the scope, the first 69 weeks, the prophetic gap, and then the 70th week, which is the tribulation period. And the abomination of desolation, and it tells us it's right in the middle. That's where we get that it's right in mid-trib.